Hey everybody, it's your local idiot again. I thought I would share a little tiny thought I had with you. Sorry about that. Um, I've recently gone through a bunch of changes. I first started addressing you guys when doing this vlog or whatever you want to call it. When I was going to school and I was living in Iowa and I was driving a bus for the city while part time while I was going to school. And now I have, and I started again when I made a trip to the West Coast and for a business trip, and I started a business and stuff. And then I realized after I did a ton of work there that the business I had just started would need a key piece of funding, and that was a marketing company that does all the digital marketing, and they also do the CRM, and that business is really in customer intensive. So there'd be a lot of customers, a lot of appointments and stuff. So the CRM part is a big deal. Now, and I came back and I said, okay, I'm going to have to put that business on pause. And now my wife got a promotion at her work where that she will move around to different parts of the country and help property management companies that are, or she works for a property management company. So she'll be helping rental properties, like apartment complexes that are struggling for whatever reason. There's a variety of reasons, but the investors aren't getting the money that they should out of it. And so she's really, really good at it. And so her job's going to be for a few months at a time to go to these new properties, or new to her properties, but they've been around forever. And right now we're in Baton Rouge. So we just got to Baton Rouge 2-3 days ago. And I used to live in Louisiana. And I love it down here. When I was 15, we moved from the state of Oregon on a whim to Lafitte, Louisiana, which is about 20 miles south of New Orleans. And we moved away about a year later. During that time, I didn't go to school. I was just, a 15-year-old kid running loose and adventuring, and spent time in the swamp. Now, we're in Lafitte, so at the time, and so that's Cajun country, 100%. And I spent all my time on a P-row or a flatboat with some other kids that actually did have to go to school, but when they were around, it was one of the best times of my entire life. So we moved to Iowa, and then I graduated high school there, went to the military and all that kind of stuff. My father was a maintenance electrician, and so I learned from an early age. I went to work with him on a regular, pretty often, which was really great for me. I don't know. I mean, he was on call all the time and stuff, and so he didn't spend a ton of time with us compared. I mean, never went. I did sports like every kid, does, and he never went to one single event, not one game, not one wrestling meet, not one anything. And so because he was always working, and if he wasn't working, he was dead tired, and he had 4 other kids besides me to look after. So when he had the opportunity, he took me with him, and I got to learn. And these were oftentimes, long trips that he would have to go on to go here and there and everywhere to work on elevators for a big company. And it was a union. And so I basically learned, the tasks and what tasks looked like and why they happened and all those kinds of things for somebody who kept elevators in hospitals and all kinds of places like that going. And whether they were having to go in an emergency because people are trapped in elevators, or whether they were just going to do the normal regular maintenance so that there would be nobody trapped in them ever. So I had that kind of life going for me, and I apprenticed under him. He was an electrician, and he wasn't just an electrician; he was an electronics whiz. Like not just a whiz, but highly trained. He was in the Navy on submarines as an electrician. a communications electrician. And so, by the time I got into the workforce, I was already pretty well versed, not just in mechanically or electrical work or whatever, but I was pretty well versed in the basic principles of maintenance, electrical maintenance. And I thought I was going to be an electrician. He always told me, "Don't do it," But I was apprenticing under him, and then he passed away. Surprisingly, out of the blue kind of thing. He was only 50 years old. I was 19. And so that was the end of that. It hadn't really officially even started, other than I've been training under him for a long, long time. But I hadn't been able to go to work with him every day and do the actual stuff as much as I should have if I was an actual apprentice. But I knew enough to do anything I had to do as far as maintenance, repair, and maintenance electronics. Back then it was all analog. There was no digital, so very different than now in some ways. But the troubleshooting principles and things like that are all the exact same. The basics that you go through, and I have to say, from what I've seen since then, I'm way past 19. Is a lot of people that weren't brought up during the analog time. My time in the military too, I was an electronics guy. Very specifically communications electronics. And I had to keep systems up and running and in good quality out in the field. So the idea was it was a combat job, even though I never went into combat with that job. It was during the 80s, the late 80s, when magically America was in no wars. But so I have lots of training after that too, of course, and then continued it in my civilian life when I got out of the military. But I was I was always destined to be some kind of maintenance guy. Because my father his father was a maintenance electrician also. And I guess we almost always seem to become what our fathers were. I know people that haven't, but I don't know why. I sure have. But anyway, so I started a business out in Oregon, as you know, and I specifically during COVID, I went through college. I started going to college because there was nothing else to do. A business that I had at that time got killed by COVID because it happened to be in other people's homes, and they came up with this thing saying you shouldn't have people in your homes. And I'm not a MAGA person, by the way. I don't agree with any of this thing about how we shouldn't have done what we did. I think that what we did was absolutely vital to get shit back to normal again. And, this is a thing that happens basically every 100 years, apparently. And it could have been so much worse. And it could have been prevented, but it could have been so much worse. And so I don't begrudge not being able to continue my business. It would have been nice, but I mean, my first business was killed by the '08 crash, the housing bubble crash that was practically engineered to happen. I'm not going to get all political, but I've had bad luck that way. I used to own 25 houses. My goal was to own 50 houses. I was working on a plan, and I had 25 houses when the '08 thing really hit, and I barely got out of that with my ass, because the plan had always been, and it always had been taken care of by buying houses with no money down, and then using the cash flow from renting out houses to pay the mortgages on them, which were a little inflated because there was no money down because I had no money. But lots of very successful real estate people have done that a lot. And I was actually following a program by a man named Carlton Sheets. And I used to be kind of a serial kind of, what do they call that? Convention kind of person, where I would go to these seminars and conventions, and basically most of my extra money went into that for decades. And in the mid 90s, it kind of stopped because I ended up moving to Iowa and getting a job that was really labor intensive, not even in the maintenance department or whatever, but it was 12 hours a day every day. And so that's when that habit got broken. But I used to go to seminars, big seminars constantly. And I attempted to invest in things. And so I never accrued a bunch of extra money like savings because it went into stuff. I was trying to make money with my money. But something happened every time. So I wasn't supposed to. But I did get to see Bill Gates as a keynote speaker at a conference one time in Portland, Oregon. So that was fun. Now I've started this next business to fund my first business. So I got an MBA. Took 6 years because, my first attempt at college was in the very early 90s, and then I never touched anything after that. And so it would have been silly for me to try to take the credits that I had earned early for an associate's degree and try to apply that without the actual degree because I was a few credits shy of that. And so to try to apply that to my new thing, which one was an associate's degree of arts, and the other one was going to be, my complete goal was to get a master's in business administration. So they didn't really mesh well. So it took me a solid 6 years, and now I owe $91,000. So if anybody wants to, donate that money and just pay that off for me, if you're rich, fine, cool, thanks, appreciate it. But if not, it's okay. I understand. We're all in that place now. So my bachelor's degree was in marketing, and my master's degree was in business, but in marketing. And my master's degree was in business administration, focused on project management. And I had no intention to be a project manager, and still don't. Though I might get the certification just to be licensed, since I studied all those years for it. And then I could probably consult. But my new business is a consulting business. I spent years and years and years. I really had been thinking about this for a long time, and what kind of business that I could have, that I could have the most impact. I know this sounds dumb, but I want to change the world. It's not going to be just me. Obviously, I don't think that would happen. I'm not that kind of impactful person, but I want to be a drop in the right bucket. Let's put it that way. And so my new business is called Professional Maintenance Consulting LLC. And I may end up changing it to an S corp, but I don't know. But for now, it's an LLC because it's just me. I worked in maintenance of various kinds, but for the most part, rental property, like apartment complexes and apartment buildings and stuff like that, for decades. But the most important thing that made me decide it was my very first mentor, my very first supervisor in the apartment complex part of it. He was an older guy, and he was like in his 70s, named John. And I think maybe it's possible I was old enough to where that I wasn't just some kid. And he was old enough to where that he needed more help, He wasn't hard. He walked fine and all that kind of stuff. But now that I'm 50 something, I know what he must have been feeling a little bit like. I think maybe he was in better health than I am or something. But he became very generous with his time for me. And I think I showed an aptitude and a desire to learn. And so he decided to mentor me. We lived about 45 minutes apart, where he worked and where I worked. We worked for the same company, but it just so happened that my company was building 4 really big complexes in the same town, and he was up in another town, and so he couldn't be there every day, and so he wanted somebody that could be. I replaced somebody when I came in, and the property that I started working on was the brand new property that wasn't done. It was like about half done when I moved there. And I started having lots and lots of meetings, lots of telephone stuff with John, and not conventions, but like lots of business meetings and functions and stuff where that he had lots to say to me about what I should be doing, what I should be expecting next, and he knew the whole picture of where the project was going, and it was going to be about 1,000 apartments in that one town within the next couple of years, and he wanted me, was trying to basically shape me into the kind of person that could write those programs, meaning see what those apartment complexes, with mine to start with, needed maintenance wise. That means, how much attention each apartment needed, how many people the whole complex needed, how it operated, under what kind of autonomy and all that kind of stuff. And I had a lot of input about everything that happened on that complex after that, like how things were built even and things. I punched all the buildings when they were brand new. I accepted them from the construction department, which my company at that time had a construction. It was originally a construction company, and then they had begun a property management company that was under their same umbrella, and it was just a different division. So I worked for the property management side, and I accepted all the buildings after inspecting them from the construction side, and then and worked with them on all the defects and stuff, which you'd be surprised how common defects are when a construction company is finished and things like that, things that they've forgotten or done improperly or whatever because they were in a hurry or who knows, no supervision, something like that on a certain day. But then I worked with John for the next 4 years. And like I said, when I started working for him, he was pretty up there in his years. I mean, I'm hoping to be not working that kind of a job when I'm in my 70s. But he was one of those people that it seemed like he didn't intend to retire until he died. So he did retire before he died, way before. But he was old school. He was a guy. He must have been in his 20s or something like that in the 1950s. And he looked and sounded like it all the time. All the guys of that age. I bet at one time he wore a fedora as a normal piece of his articles of clothing, kind of a thing. And he was sharp. He was a sharp man. He knew everything about maintenance. You would have thought he was military trained, but he hadn't been in the military since World War II or whatever it was, that were somewhere right after that. But I got the benefit of getting to train under somebody with his level of experience at the beginning of the beginning of my maintenance time. And I kind of took it for granted other than the fact that I, had a mentor that actually cared about me and stuff, kind of like my father was, and I don't think I ever wrote anything down. I just memorized it because doing what he said was really, really important to me, and so I had very frequent contact with him every week for 4 years, and so over and over and over again, and then building the maintenance programs, finishing the maintenance program for the complex I was on, and then building one for the next complex, and then building the next one for the next complex, and then building the next one for the next complex in my town. I really got it down. I had to build the program. I had to hire and train the maintenance people from the maintenance supervisor all the way down. And there were a lot of tricks, that John taught me that they are not necessarily intuitive. And I've taken those with me ever since then, to kind of everything I went to, even things that were kind of unrelated, like I worked on towboats on the Mississippi River for a few years and pretty unrelated, but believe it or not, every deckhand is a little bit of a maintenance guy. So, so it applied a little bit, to some things, but then later when I stopped doing that, I went back into maintenance of various kinds. And I guess it's what I do. It's my thing. So I tried the businesses 3 times. The last one, like I said, got killed because of COVID. And I went to school and then went and worked part time as a bus driver, and I drove elderly and handicapped people specifically. And now I've decided to kind of get back into it, but in a way that's kind of more appropriate for my age. Sorry, John, if you can hear that. But I'm doing a consulting business. Because of how surprising. My wife is a manager of apartment complexes. She and I managed at one time for a retirement company. We managed assisted living places. They were actually not called assisted living. They were a little bit lighter of, we didn't have medical facilities or anything like that. They were more, the people were more autonomous, and stuff. But it was still a really expensive, very expensive complex. And the stakes were really high for us to get it all right. And we managed one for a year. We managed another one for another year. And the one we went to in the beginning was troubled. It wasn't underperforming seriously, but it was troubled. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. The second one, we got asked, and we really put out some fires. There was some major, major, major problems at that community during that year, and we got an award from the company and all kinds of stuff because of how we performed. And the other thing is, I have to say that company really, really trained us. We had to go to a school in Dallas, Texas for a few weeks before we went to the company, where they continued to train us, but there was a lot of training involved. And then they asked us to go to this other property in Kennewick, Washington, because it was struggling. It was really actually underperforming, and it was their flagship property. It was gorgeous. We took a drive up there. It was like a 2-hour drive, but we went up there to look at it, and it was just phenomenal. Our other community was nice, really nice, especially for things like this. They're exceptionally nice. But this other one it looked like something out of, Hollywood, or maybe from the Hollywood Hills or the, 90210 or something like that, right? Well, anyway, in that year, we turned it around by like 18% in 12 months. And I ran all the marketing stuff, and I supervised the maintenance department and things like that. And the maintenance department, kitchen department, all the personnel. My wife did everything. She worked with me. We were co-managers. She did everything in the office as far as leasing, compliance, things like that. There was a couple of different times when in our own roles where that we made ourselves very valuable and got awards from the company for that, But within 2 years, now the company was really rough, even though they're one of the biggest companies in the entire world that does what they do. Their business model is one that creates problems, and they don't have a very friendly management system above community managers. And we got in some other managers that were just a nightmare. And when we started there, though, we did a bunch of research before we made life changes and started working for those guys. And we found out that at that time, through Glassdoor, that company had an 88% turnover rate, which was, phenomenally horrible. But, we knew what we were getting into and stuff. So, and we did 2 solid years, which is better than probably most, is my guess. And we did meet a tiny little handful of managers during that 2 years that had been there longer. One couple had been there for 17 years, which all I could say is I bowed at their feet, and would follow them around if I wouldn't get arrested for it, just so I could learn how to do what they did. So, but now the consulting business is my whole plan is to get hired by companies to do an assessment of whatever property. There's lots of reasons for people that would need a consulting maintenance person, because the need is that maintenance is one of the biggest leaks in the boat if it's not done properly. So investors invest their money in these properties and they expect dividends back. But if the manager isn't paying attention to budgets and the NOI isn't right, the ROI won't be right. So the idea is that people are investing, they should get a certain amount of return back from that. That's pretty predictable. But if your maintenance department is run incorrectly, it doesn't even have to be run shoddily, just incorrectly, you can flush your profits down the toilet like that really quickly. Maintenance is responsible for a tremendous amount of the profit and or loss. And run poorly, it's really, really common to have a very unprofitable property just because of the maintenance program. And sometimes it starts with the manager or even higher, regional manager or something like that isn't monitoring and measuring what the maintenance department is doing correctly, because that is a constant thing. And hiring a good maintenance supervisor is another really big deal. But very often between management or between office and maintenance, there's a big disconnect where that office people almost always come from leasing and they know nothing about maintenance other than, and if they're really lucky, they've got a good maintenance supervisor who takes care of it all, and they don't really teach them, unfortunately. And then they assume when they get to be a bigger position that it's always just sort of going to run itself. Well, it doesn't work like that. The last place my wife worked at had a terrible, you notice I'm not saying any business names, right? But had a terrible maintenance supervisor. He literally came with the property because the regional manager came with the property. He was the manager at the time when the company bought the property. And for some strange reason, not because they decided that he had a good record or anything like that, but they needed a regional, and so they just plain old promoted him. Okay? He presents well, the regional, but that's as far as it goes. I got to watch him for several years, working with my wife and hearing the problems that my wife faced, and I was always like, hey, wait a minute, that's not supposed to be you. That's supposed to be the regional that does that. Well, then it'd be, hey, that's not something supposed to be that you're supposed to do. That's something that's supposed to be done by the maintenance supervisor. Well, and then I got the explanation of that. The manager who then got promoted to regional liked, like as a friend, this maintenance supervisor. He was not a maintenance supervisor before. He was a maintenance technician. And another employee in the office that he really liked as a person. It was kind of like a little group of friends, because they at one time were just the people on that property and that was it, and tight-knit friends. Well, one of the problems with that maintenance or with that regional manager is that he decided he wanted his friends to be working there still at his property, where that now my wife was the manager of. So he told my wife, not asked my wife, but told her that this one guy was going to be the new maintenance supervisor. And through the course of the next year, I figured out that he had never been a maintenance supervisor before because he didn't know anything about it. And then I figured out that, because we talk about generalities at home or whatever, but she never specifically talks about work stuff. And I have to sort of glean it, and remember stuff. It's kind of like a memory game. And found out that this maintenance supervisor never intended to be a maintenance supervisor. He actually refused to be the maintenance supervisor because of all the extra work that goes with it. But he said he needed the money that the maintenance supervisor made, or he just had to leave. And for some strange reason, I would have told him, here's the door. Don't let the door hit you. But the regional manager capitulated to that and told him, okay, no problem. Like as if it didn't matter who was the supervisor, and the man was a little bit older, so he could have been. It was possible, but he didn't know anything about it in the end, and he refused to do it because he didn't want to do. He just wanted to be a maintenance tech because being a maintenance tech's easy, if you know some stuff, some trade stuff. So my wife ended up having to do, as the manager, all of her work, plus a ton of things that a maintenance supervisor is supposed to do, which was bull. Luckily for that property, my wife is a high performer with 2 master's degrees, and a lot of experience. And then she was also forced to keep a person in the office who was just terrible. I mean, she had been a leasing agent, but she wouldn't. My wife had a ton of experience and good experience, and she wouldn't. This person wouldn't do anything that my wife told her to do, and she was not a 20-something, so she knows, how to act at work, but she would never do the things she was assigned to do, and because she literally just. I don't know if she felt untouchable or if she was just that big of a dummy, but so it was to the level of, it wasn't just if she was a bad worker, she was practically a saboteur, and my wife had to do, and then she was forced to promote that person to assistant manager because of this regional told her to. So not only was she, basically having to undo a whole bunch of stuff that this other person was doing constantly and then fixing it correctly because she refused to actually do her job. On top of that, she was having to do the tasks done by the that was refused by the maintenance supervisor. So, I mean, on a regular basis, I would hear all the things she was doing, and I was just like shaking my head because there was nothing I could do about it, and my wife was capable of it. While she was pulling her hair out every week. I'm surprised she's not bald. But the idea was that a supervisor or a manager at whatever level can make you or break you. And my wife, despite all of that headwind, was a top performer there. And she recently got promoted. And we're, thank the Lord, out of there, Because she was about to quit. And she was about to come onto one of the businesses I just started, and but then luckily somebody saw her potential. Somebody way higher up saw her potential and promoted her out of there. Now the regional tried his best to sabotage that because he didn't want her to go. You know why? Because she was doing his work, and the metrics were wonderful. When she left, that assistant manager was going to get promoted. That meant not only was there not a high performer there, there was a saboteur there that, even though this regional had been hearing about it for 5 years and did nothing but, tell my wife to, just shut her down and just tell her to take it. Now he's going to have to figure out how to do it all. And he's just in a world of hurt now. And it's only going to get worse. Because the way the company, allowed that to go was because as far as the metrics goes, that they look at, everything was cool. The occupancy was up. NOI was great. ROI was good. Budgets were all good. She was getting bonuses on all that stuff because she was controlling the narrative. Now that she's gone, I mean, it's any day now the place is going to burn down, But we're on to a property that is having similar problems. But the company promoted my wife to a level that even a bad regional cannot thwart her efforts. Why? It's the company. I will say this: this is an excellent company. They've been treating my wife excellently from her regional. Above her regional. From her regional on down, it was terrible. She was lucky enough to work around some normal, nice, decent leasing agents, but and there's the normal influx of problem people or whatever. That's normal at every job. But certain things were constantly bad. And so now that we're on to this new situation, it is just such a relief. But I had that 5 years to listen to all that stuff that she was dealing with as a result of a bad maintenance supervisor. Honestly, I tell you what, I took it for granted. All the years that I was a maintenance supervisor, and I worked for a really big company at one time, Graystar, and the other maintenance guys were just top quality. Not my maintenance guys, because I had a similar problem where they predated me. When I got there once they were already there, and I had a really unfortunate manager, and the regional manager there was somebody that I had used to work for that company, and it was somebody there 17 years prior that had been a brand new leasing agent when I was the maintenance supervisor. We had very little contact. I just remembered her from seeing her in the office. But the manager never wanted to hire me at Graystar, at that company. She didn't want to hire me because her maintenance supervisor, which was excellent, was leaving to do something else, and the two knuckleheads that worked under him that he was trying to get trained were just ridiculous cartoons. And this young manager that I was now working for was just terrible at business. And I have no idea at this time what the occupancy was when I left. I hope it was good. I don't wish that company any ill will, or even that manager, even though she was a knucklehead herself. But she didn't want me to come in. She didn't want me to work there. She wanted to, since the other guy was going away, she wanted to promote the maintenance guy that she had known the longest on that crew. He was completely unprepared for that. He had never been trained as a maintenance supervisor. So, and I found this out when I worked there, but she sabotaged me to that regional. Now that regional trained her, the manager, from the time that she was a brand spanking new, very, very young leasing agent. She was, kind of a favorite. And I didn't see it at the time, really. I noticed it at the very last day, what the results of that would be. I saw the favorable treatment over and above other managers and stuff. And so I put two and two together. And then I found out that, what their relationship had been and what all that kind of stuff. But on the last day, I never got any trouble whatsoever from that regional until the very last day. And then the very last day, that regional turned on a dime and was really mad at me. And I was like thinking to myself, I wonder what this is about, because, I've done nothing wrong. And it was because apparently, like I say, I was all putting it together that day. Apparently that manager had been not giving me good reviews and stuff like this to that regional, because she still wanted, they said they had to give me a try because I was much, much more qualified, but they still had to give me a try. So, or give me a try, but she had plans that entire time that he was going to be the maintenance supervisor and that I was going to be there a short time. I made it a few months before her plan ended up working out. And on my very last day, I was having some medical problems. I had a TIA. I don't know if you know what that is. It's a mini stroke. What it is a stroke where something gets trapped in your brain somewhere, like a piece of cholesterol or whatever. But then it dislodges, like Roto-Rooter got in there or whatever, on its own. And so it starts off kind of messing you up, but then eventually you're A-OK. Well, I became A-OK in the ER, right? And so it was classified as a TIA. And that was my last day. And that was the day that I had a ton of stuff to do already, because the guys that worked for me were knuckleheads. And it was a great property. Oh, it was one of the properties that I originally opened up. Remember I told you under that one guy? It was one of the properties. It was the third property that I opened up, where I had hired the maintenance guy and I had trained the maintenance or the lead maintenance guy, maintenance supervisor, and I helped him get his guys trained, and I was in love with that property. Even though I was on another property, that was the most beautiful one in town at that time, and that's in a college town, so it was pretty awesome. So anyway, that's, I kind of thought at that moment, well, maybe I'm done with maintenance because, I was having these weird medical problems and stuff that was kind of building up to this, to her being able to pull the trigger on me. I wasn't missing work and stuff like that. But I was having difficulty at work that I had never experienced before. And, I know it sounds messed up, but I'd kind of been there and done that, and it should have been a really easy gig, except that it was suddenly not an easy gig. And physically, I was having to stop and rest. And, my dad died of a heart attack at 50. And I thought, shit, maybe I've got some kind of blockage or some damn thing, and because I was probably about 50, and she basically used some of that as an excuse to get rid of me, and it worked, So anyway, I've come full circle since then. We figured out my medical stuff years ago now. And I went to college, and then I got done with that and have figured out how to take my experience with maintenance and manage it, and then realize that there's too many companies out there that have maintenance programs that are just running themselves. Their maintenance supervisors are not supervising anything, and there's a ton of actual specific jobs that a maintenance supervisor is supposed to do that I was witnessing one that was refusing to do them, and the regional manager was permitting that regardless of what the property manager wanted. And the regional manager and the property manager are not the investors. They're not the ones losing money. In fact, they're getting paid every month, pretty sweetly, in fact. So I started putting out, I started the business. I did all the things, got the insurance, all that stuff. And I'm still building it. I'm still making it. I'm still writing all the SOPs. I'm still writing all the things out. And I haven't started advertising yet. That's what this is going to begin to be. This is a really shoddy example of what I'm going to be doing advertising wise, but it's just for fun right now. And I'm not charging anywhere near what some of my competitors would be charging. Which could even be a mistake, but at the same time, when you're brand new, you got to do what you got to do to get people to look at you. I think within a year or two that I'll be busier than I want to be necessarily, But this business right here is literally just to fund the other business. So once I get to a place where that I can do, even just 2 or 3 assessments a year with this business, that actually end up doing some after work also. An assessment, which my product is called, it's brand new. I'm having a hard time remembering what it is. But anyway, my main product is the assessment, where that I go to a property, I go through a checklist, I determine what are its positives, what are its negatives, what the program looks like now. They have a maintenance supervisor and they have maintenance people. Do they have enough or do they have too many? What's their interaction between them and the office staff? And does the office understand how maintenance is supposed to work and what their relationship should be with maintenance? Because that's a biggie too. It's designed to be a Swiss watch, where that everybody works together at the right time, or it just doesn't work. Okay. When the office gets notices of, calls or whatever of work orders, they're supposed to process them in a certain way so that the right people see them in a timely fashion, and what's called turnovers or make readies, some people call them that. When the office gets notification that somebody's going to move out in 30 days, instantly, like that day, they need to put a written notice to the maintenance supervisor, who then needs to schedule a 24-hour inspection. So in 24 hours, he's going to go inspect that apartment, and he's going to go through a checklist, and he will know every single thing that apartment needs. Like, did somebody punch a hole in the door? Is there a big dent in the refrigerator? All those kinds of things. Does there need to be brand new carpet? And so he's going to have 30 days of time to get ready for that apartment to be turned over for the next people. And all that means is the apartment has to be returned to exactly brand new condition. There's no exceptions. I've heard so many bad managers say, oh, we can let that go. The problem is, though, when you let that go, when you start a relationship with the next renter, you're already in trouble, because then they're accepting that you're crap. Okay, the whole complex, as far as they're concerned, the bad countertops, the bad carpet, the bad smell, the places where they missed the painting, every single thing, the person's going to notice every single thing. And every one of those things, everybody knows should have been fixed. And that's the job of the maintenance director, maintenance supervisor. Okay. And the word goes out. People come over to somebody's apartment, for a get together or just to hang out and watch, a game or whatever. And then those people are taking mental notes. And somebody's asking you, hey, you just moved to that place. What do you think of it? And people are going to say, oh man, the place was so awesome when I moved in. They had not everything like brand new or in perfect condition, but they had a little basket on the countertop for me, and it had some dishwasher soap, which I really didn't need because I already had mine, but it was awesome. And they had a little bitty cutting board, and stuff. I mean, I didn't need those things, but it was really cool. There was a roll of toilet paper in there. It was brand new. I didn't need that. I had that from my other place, but it was really cool. You know how many times I've heard that? Literally that exact shit right there. It was really cool. That stuff cost like $8 to put together. And when we got here, they had that. They had that for us, and the apartment that we took was brand new looking. It's like they knew, and I'm not ultra picky, but if I was turning it, it would be done exactly like this. There was a couple little things that I would have actually done that they didn't do, but I'm not crazy about it. I'm not even going to say what they were, simply because I was so impressed by the work they did. I was so impressed by the choices they made, And that's what it's supposed to be like every time. When you move into a place that smells funny, or the carpet's not quite right, or all those kind of things, you're moving into a ghetto rat trap. They're going to treat you like that for the rest of the entire time. It's like when you're first dating a new girl and she's rude to the waitress or rude to the waiter. That's going to be your life if you keep on hanging out with her. So a smart person runs for the hills, right? Well, that's how the maintenance thing is. You have a chance to make a first impression. And if you can't, because you're being told by the manager, or the manager's being told by the regional, or who knows what, that we're not spending any more money. The budget's not there. Occupancy's low. And so we're not going to spend enough to make it look right. You're dooming yourself already. You got to spend money to make money. You don't have to waste it. But what happens invariably with a poor manager or a poor regional or a poor to no maintenance supervisor is the money that is being spent isn't being spent well. It's being wasted. And then the money that results from that, which is low occupancy and things like that, is they say, no, cut those guys off. I'm not spending any more money on that stuff right now, as they're not even making the money that we're supposed to be getting. Only a fool does that. And I'm not addressing anybody in particular, but when you go from all the levels of management up to the investor that owns a property, when they cut their maintenance staff short, or they cut their leasing staff short, or they cut their maintenance budget short because of a shrinking profit margin, then you've just proven that the fool wasn't just the maintenance supervisor, or a bad manager, or an inexperienced manager, or a bad regional. Where we're at now, the regional is we've been so lucky. The regional is on top of it, very, very experienced. The manager is an experienced person, but just not very well trained, and probably way too much pressure from the get-go, because it's obvious that really simple things that are common sense are getting missed, and bad decisions are being made based on pressure they're experiencing. And simple things that went, if anybody that's ever been hired to a new job and you had to go through a training period, if the people that are training you, who could be just a monkey, not smart people at all. I had a job like that a few years ago where the guy training me was just, man, he didn't have the basics down of life. And every little thing that I did, and I was 6 times smarter than him, easy. Everything that I did that wasn't 100% correct because I just hadn't been there long enough, or the routine or whatever, he was immediately upset and stuff. And of course, I was hypersensitive because I really wanted to do a good job, and which made me feel the kind of pressure that was silly for me to feel. Okay, because I'm a high performer and always have been. I think I was a high performer right after high school. High school, I didn't give a damn. I didn't understand it, why people would have to care. I was a typical teenager, right? And then when I went to the military, they fixed that. I was a worker when I was in high school, out of high school, but I had no appreciation for the free education I was getting. Free to me, free to my parents. And, but I learned it very quickly in the military. And it's one of those things when you don't appreciate what you have, you end up making a fool out of yourself. And I did that in spades. Anyway, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I'm gonna go ahead and cut this short so it doesn't actually become an hour, which means it's getting close. I miss you guys. It's been a long time since I've said anything because there was a little upheaval there, and I don't know, maybe I didn't want to jinx it, or maybe we just had so much going on that I didn't really have the time to sit down and talk to you. But I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana now, and I was in Iowa, and I took a little trip for a while to Oregon, but now I'm down here and I'm getting the cleaning business that I designed and set up. I'm getting it started in Baton Rouge. Even though it's based out of Oregon, it's going to be headquartered in Oregon because of the taxes. It's going to be starting in Baton Rouge and New Orleans. And I already have people picked out for it. So anyway, if anybody has comments or anything like that, you could contribute. And I don't mean money. Keep your money. Please comment. Give me advice. Content creators like that will see this or whatever on the various places where I post it. If you have any suggestions or advice, like what kind of equipment to use, time limits, all those things, please let me know. And there are some of the media places that only allow 3 minutes. Some of them are, like YouTube are never ending, I guess. But any suggestions you have, please give them to me, and I would really appreciate it, and I'll include you in my stuff. Well, anyway, have a great day, and this has been your local idiot signing off. See ya.